We are getting back to Driven to Distraction. And speaking of which, my boy is outside here, so there may be some distractions as I have to make sure that he still stays in view. But this is, I feel like, the best time to do this, because when he goes to sleep, I have to do homework because I am back in school full-time, and there's just not a lot of time to do extra things like this. So we're gonna see what we can do today. So yesterday we covered the introduction, and today we're going to get as far into chapter 1 as we can. And my plan was to go through and highlight a few things from the introduction stuck out and then talk about those. I guess we've lost the doggies that will keep us tested with our focus this morning. Okay, so chapter 1 is attention deficit disorder. Once you catch on to what this syndrome is all about, you'll see it everywhere. People you used to think of as disorganized or manic or creative but unpredictable. People who you know could do more if they could just get together. That's just funny. I think that about myself. People who have bounced around in school or in their professional lives. I think we talked about this, something like 7 declared measures, 2 degrees out of those 7, an associate degree in fire protection technology, a bachelor's degree in strategic communications, completely far off out of the spectrum, and now I'm going back for a master's in photography, and even though I'm doing it, I'm already like, is this the right choice? Like I've only taken 1 summer course, fall started yesterday, and I want to drop out because I'm like, I shouldn't be doing this. Isn't the right path. So that's awesome. Something that I have to battle through. I'm like, no, stick through, do this. And jobs. I talked about this. If anyone we read through the part of chapter 1, I think. Or maybe just the intro from the last one, where I mentioned how many jobs that I had, which is too many to count, all the way from teaching preschool to being a corrections officer in a maximum security prison, to being a lifty at the mountain, to be promotional sales in LA, to the acting, and then all the volunteer organizations that I've been a part of, and then like had leadership in, and I excel at the beginning, and then kind of like, well, okay, what's going on now? And if I'm like not doing it all the time, then it just kind of fades away. Let's go back in here. People who have made it to the top but still feel driven or disorganized. These may be people who in fact have attention deficit disorder. You may even recognize some of the symptoms of your own behavior. Many of the symptoms of ADD are so common that all of us, that we use the term ADD to have specific meaning. Rather than just be a scientific sounding label for the complex lives we lead, we need to define the syndrome carefully. The best way to understand what ADD is and what it is not is to see how it affects the lives of people who have it. In the cases that follow, and in the many case illustrations that appear in this book, you can witness the struggles individuals faced to break through inaccurate labels and unfair judgments. As their stories unfold, a definition of ADD emerges. Case 1, Jim. It was 11 o'clock at night, and Jim Finnegan was up pacing in his study. This was where he often found himself at night, alone, pacing, trying to get things together. I mean, already. This is crazy. Okay. Now approaching the halfway point of life, being desperate. Halfway point of life. Okay, this is up in the middle of the night, pacing, halfway point of life. Again, it's just crazy how much this is like, is this me? Did they write this book about me? He looked around the room and took in the disorder. The room looked as if the contents of a bag lady's shopping cart had been dumped into it. Books, papers, odd socks, old letters, a few half-smoked packages of Marlboros, and other loot lay scattered about, much like the bits and pieces of cognition that were strewn about in mind. Jim looked up at the to-do list that was tacked on the corkboard above his desk. There were 17 items, the final ones times. in black ink and marked with exclamation, reorganization proposal, due Tuesday, 3/19. This was Monday, 3/18. Jim hadn't started on the proposal. He'd been thinking weeks, ever since he told his boss he had a plan that would increase productivity as well as morale in the office. His boss said, fine, come up with a written proposal and we'll see how it looks. His boss had also added a remark about how he hoped Jim would have enough follow-through to actually get something done this time. Right? And if Jim's anything like me, when Jim came up with this idea, of course he was going to follow through. He knows it with all his heart. There's no question in his mind. He's like, I'm going to follow through on this one. No, I know. You know, this isn't like all the other times where I've thought about something and then it fizzled out and I didn't make the deadline or I went on to the next thing. This is the one. Jim knew what he wanted to say. He'd known for months what he wanted to say. The office needed a new computer system and the men and women out front needed more authority so they could make decisions on the spot so everyone's time wouldn't be wasted on unnecessary meetings. Efficiency would go up and morale would definitely improve. It was simple, obvious. All the ideas were detailed on the various scraps of paper that dotted the floor of his room. But all Jim could do was pace. Where do I start? He thought to himself. If it doesn't come out right, I'll look stupid, probably get fired. So what else is new? Why should this job be any different? Great ideas, no follow through. That's me. Good old Jim. He kicked the trash basket and added to the mess on the floor. Okay, breathe in, breathe out, he told himself. What's also funny about the proposals on this is I have what, four book proposals that are all that I've had some people a little bit excited about, but they just need more work. They need fine-tuned, and I was hoping to get them done, at least one of them done before school started yesterday, and I not, and then I feel really bad about it, and yeah, so let's just see. Let's see what Jim does here. He sat down at his work product, stared at the screen. Then he went over to his desk and began to straighten things up. The telephone rang and he barked at it. Can't you see I'm busy? When the answer machine came on, he heard Pauline's voice. Jim, I'm going to sleep now. I just wanted to see how your proposal is coming. Good luck with it tomorrow. He didn't have the heart to pick up the phone. The night went on agonizingly. One minor distraction after another would knock Jim offline as he tried to clutch onto the task at hand. A cat would meow outside. He'd think of something that someone had said 3 days ago and wonder what they really meant by that. 3 days ago? How about 10 years ago? He wanted a new pencil. The one he had felt heavy in his hand. Finally, he got down the words. A proposal, office reorganization at Unger Laboratories. Then nothing. Just say what you want to say, a friend had told him. Okay, what you want to say? But nothing came. He thought of a new job he wanted to apply for. Maybe I should just bag this and go to bed. Can't do that. No matter how bad it is, I've got to finish this proposal. By 4 a.m., he was beaten. The words began to come. Somehow his extreme fatigue had lifted the sensor in his mind and found himself explaining his ideas simply and efficiently. By 6, he was in bed, hoping to get a little sleep before his meeting with his boss at 9. The only trouble was that at 9, he was still in bed, having forgotten to set the alarm before he went to sleep. When he arrived in a panic at the office room, he knew from the look on his boss's face that no matter how good the proposal was, his days at Unger were over. Why don't you find a place with a little bit more flexibility, boss said, and thanked him for his proposal. You're an idea man, Jim. Find the place that can accommodate to your style. Oof. And a man. That exact line, was not expecting that to hit. Someone else, I saw someone else be labeled as an idea man years ago. And what it meant, that connotation, that label meant that's all that person can do, have these ideas. In other words, like full of shit, you know, like they just have ideas, but they don't ever do anything with them. So an idea man, you know, what does that do? And then there's time out like, hey, I've got a lot of good ideas that, like, is there a spot for me that I can find that has, you can get back up, Bubby. You can get back up. You got it. You got it, Bubs. You got it. Just wipe your hands off. You're just in the wood chips. You got it. Wipe your hands off and get back up. So yeah, idea, man, that hurts. I don't get it, he said to Pauline over drinks several weeks later. I know I have more to offer than getting myself fired every 6 months, but it's always the same old story. Great ideas, but can't get it done. You know, I said, that's one thing. I've never been fired. I've actually done well enough to where I'm usually like asked to stay, and then when I'm leaving, I'm just like, I can't be here anymore. This is killing me because I've realized that this can't be my final place. Even in high school, can you believe that? The guidance counselor, she was really this lady. She told me that I had the highest IQ in the class. And so she just couldn't figure out why I had such a hard time living up to my potential. And then living up to your potential, so that's to me is one of, I've said before, and I don't know if it's like sounds arrogant or whatever to be like, I don't think I'm living up to my potential. But the most depressive thoughts is that I'm going to end up dying. And then people will say, man, what if Rob could have focused on something? What if, it's just sad that he was just always scattered because there was a lot of potential there and could never figure it out. And it's not about the other people, really. It's more so about me feeling the same way. You know what's not fair? Pauline said, turning the stem of her Manhattan glass between her thumb and her forefinger. They took the ideas in your proposal and used them. Dramatic improvement. Everyone's happier and work is up. Those were your ideas, Jim, and you got fired. It's not fair. I don't know what's wrong with me, Jim said. I don't know what to do. Jim had attention deficit disorder. When he came to see me at the age of 32, he had been living a life of chronic underachievement. Hey, 32? That's midlife? Oh, shit. I don't know what's going on with me. Sorry, I saw a comment. Here for it, got the notification. Empty school. Explain yourself real quick, bud. Explain myself in which way? Empty's got to tell me who you are. When he came to my office at the age of 32, he had been living a underachievement, falling short of his goals, both at work and in relationships because of an underlying neurological problem that made it difficult for him to pay attention, sustain effort, and complete tasks. ADD is a neurological syndrome whose classic defining triad of symptoms included impulsivity, distractibility, and hyperactivity or excess energy. About 18 million Americans have it today. While awareness has increased in the years since Driven to Distraction was first published, many still do not know that they have it. The condition occurs in children and adults, men and women, boys and girls, and it cuts across all ethnic groups, socioeconomic strata, levels of education, and degrees of intelligence. It used to be thought that this was a disorder of childhood alone, and that one output during adolescence. We now know that only about a third of the ADD population outgrows it. 2/3 have it throughout adulthood. ADD is not a learning disability or a language disability or dyslexia and is associated with low intelligence. In fact, many people who have ADD are very smart. It's just that their smartness gets tangled up inside. Undoing the tangle to get a smooth run. Good job, buddy. So I've got a doggy under here trying to get me to get his ball, but I don't know where it went. Yeah, sorry, someone's doing construction right next to me. Again, this is the world, right? This is the world that we live in. And then we have to work on staying focused throughout all of these distractions. Where we go. Undoing the tangle to get a smooth run on the line can take more patience and perseverance than they can consistently bring to bear. Where does a syndrome begin and normal behavior leave off? What is impulsivity? What is distractibility? How much energy is excess? These are the questions we will explore throughout this book, mainly in the context of individual cases like symptoms. Considering the symptoms, can't we all recognize parts of ourselves? Yes. However, one bases the diagnosis of ADD not on the mere presence of these symptoms, but on their severity and duration and the extent to which they interfere with everyday life. When Jim came in he was at wit's end. He came into my office, sat down on one of the easy chairs, and began to run his fingers through his curly hair. He leaned forward, alternately looking at me or staring at the floor. I don't know where to begin. I don't even know what I'm doing here, he said, shaking his head as if to say, no, this won't help either. Did you have any trouble finding your way here? I asked. He was 20 minutes late, so I figured he'd lost. Yes, I did. I mean, your directions were fine. It wasn't your fault. I just turned left where I should have turned right, and then I was gonzo. School was out. It's a miracle at all. I ended up some gas station in Somerville. Well, it can be pretty confusing, I said, hoping to let him relax a little bit. Of the people who consult me for problems related to ADD, probably about half are either late for their first appointment or miss it altogether. I have come to expect it. It comes with the territory. My patients, however, usually feel very bad about it, and so begin the session thinking that I am going to reprimand them in some way. You certainly aren't the first person to get lost coming here, I said. Really? That's good to hear. He took a deep breath to say something, but paused, as if the words had crowded in his throat, then let his breath out in a long sigh. The words apparently dispersed. He went through the same cycle a second time before I asked him if maybe he could use a few moments just to collect his thoughts while I wrote down some bits of information about him, like his name, address, and telephone number. That seemed to help. Okay, Jim said. Let's start. Ivy's at school, bub. You want to slide down the slide? Go ahead. You can make it. You can make the slide. Go ahead, bubby. Okay, I responded, leaning back in my chair, folding my hands behind my head. There was another long pause, and another sigh from Jim. I can see that it's hard for you to get started, I said. Maybe we could focus on what the problem is that brought you here. Yes, he said. Okay. With that little bit of prodding from me, Jim began to fill most of his history. A normal childhood, or so it seemed to him. But when I pressed for more detail, Jim acknowledged that he was quite rambunctious in grade school and enjoyed getting into mid. He got good grades even though he never really studied. I thought school was like playtime, he said. But with high school, things got tougher. His innate intelligence couldn't carry him so easily more, and he began to fall behind. He started to get lectures from his teachers and parents on moral shortcomings. Tough, right? Moral shortcomings. It just hurts hearing that. How he was letting himself and everyone else down. How in the long run, he'd be the worse for it, and so forth. His self-esteem fell. Although somehow his inborn temperament was buoyant enough to keep him fairly upbeat. After stumbling through college, he began a long series of jobs in a various computer-related field. So you like computers? I could have invented them, he said with great enthusiasm. I love them. I just have the understanding of them. You know what I mean? I know what makes them tick, and I know how to get the most out of them. If only I could tell people what I know. If only I didn't screw up every time I get a chance. How did you screw up? I asked. How did I screw up? He asked, then repeated the question again, turning into a sorrowful state by his tone of voice. How do I screw up? I forget. I argue. I postpone. I procrastinate. I get lost. I get mad. I don't follow through. You name it, I do it. I'll get into these discussions with my boss and I'll see why my way is right. And then next thing you know, I'm calling him a stupid jerk for not seeing that I'm right. Tends to get you fired, calling your boss a stupid jerk. Hey, Bubs, go ahead and go down the slide. Do it. Go down the slide and then come to me. Come on, Bubs, you got it. So we have a little playground, I guess 3 levels, ground level, middle level, and a little balcony type thing. And Mikey's in the middle, wanting to go down the slide, but I think he just wants me to be at the bottom. But he can do it. He can do it. You got it, buddy. Or I'll have this idea, but I won't be able to find it. Like it's a jumble lost in the closet or something. It's in there. I know it's in there, but I just can't get it out. I want to get it out. I try to get it out, but I can't. One of my old girlfriends told me before she left me that I should face it. I'm just a loser. Maybe she's right. I don't know. Oh, relationships. You cared about her? I asked. Well, for a while, but then she got fed up like all the rest have. I mean, I'm pretty intense to be with. Where do you think that intensity comes from? I don't know. It's just always been there. The longer we talked, the better it became how right Jim was. How the intensity had always been there. Seldom harnessed, but always burning. That intensity may in part explain why ADD is common among people in high energy fields, from sales to advertising to commodities to any high pressure, high stimulus kind of work. Have you ever consulted a psychiatrist before? I asked. A couple of times, Jim said. They were nice guys, but nothing changed. One of them told me not to drink so much. Well, how much do you drink? I binge. When I really want to let loose, I go out and tie one on. Family tradition. My dad drank a lot. I guess you could say he was an alcoholic. I don't think I'm an alcoholic, but that's what they all say, huh? Anyway, I get these terrible hangovers the next day, so then I don't go back to it for a while. Often people with ADD self-medicate with alcohol or marijuana or cocaine. Cocaine particularly is similar to one of the medications used in pharmacological treatment of ADD. Jim began to cross and uncross his legs a lot as we talked. If you're feeling restless, feel free to pace a bit while we talk, I said. Really? You don't mind? Thanks a lot. He stood up and began to walk around, conducting his conversation with his arms as he spoke. Great. Most people would get unnerved if I did this, but I really think better when I walk. Is that weird? No wonder I have trouble in school. You know, that's half my problem. I'm always so tied up inside, and you can imagine it doesn't go over big at work if I want to pace half the time. All right, I'm gonna go get Bro is not wanting to hop down. I don't think signal is gonna last. Wi-Fi is gonna reach to the playground, so I'm gonna go get him real quick. All right, right back. You wanna go down? Okay, here we go. Bloop, 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 bloop. This is great. Most people would get unnerved if I did this, but I really think better when I walk. Is that weird? No wonder I had trouble in school. You know, that's half my problem. I'm so tied up inside, and you can imagine it doesn't go over big at work if I want to pace half the time. I don't know, I said. Maybe you just haven't found the right job. You sound like all my bosses. Is there a right job for me? ADD comes in many shapes and sizes. In many people, particularly adults, the symptoms of ADD are masked by more obvious problems such as depression or gambling or drinking. And the underlying ADD is never detected. In other people, the symptoms take on a particular cast, congruent with the person's personality as it evolves over time, so that the symptoms are never really noticed the way symptoms of a cold or a flu might be, but rather dismissed as being part of just the way he is, not warranting medical or psychiatric intervention. And within the domain of properly diagnosed ADD, there is also much variability. Jim's ADD, as I was discovering, was the high energy, hyperactive type. But there's another kind of ADD that shows no hyperactivity whatsoever. Indeed, these people can be underactive. This is the child, often a girl, who sits back at the back of the classroom daydreaming. The adult who moves serenely within a cloud, never quite present anywhere. I don't know if there is a right job for you, I said, back to Jim's question. For now, I'd just like to hear more of your story. Have you ever really told it before? No, nobody can follow me. I go off on too many tangents, they all say. That's funny. Because I've told my story times, you know, like it takes me, if you ask me, so tell me your story, you better have 3 hours. Well, you just keep talking and let me do the organizing. That's what I'm paid for. Jim talked for a long while, over weeks. He told stories of misunderstanding, miscommunication, self-reproach, underachievement, missed chances, angry people, and risky behavior. It often seemed, as his mother had told him when he was 12, that he simply didn't know enough to come in out of the rain. He'd do foolishness, forget and dilly-dally all the time. But he also told stories of adventure and kindness and intuition and charm and energy and enthusiasm. He told big dreams and high hopes and big disappointments as well. Baffled and frustrated, he never blamed anyone but himself. He was a very likable guy, even though he didn't like himself very much. Yeah. And this is the case with so many people who have ADD. They are very likable, although they get into the most difficult of patches. They can be exasperating in the extreme. One mother called me about her son who had ADD and had just inadvertently almost set fire to his school and asked me if she could run over him in her truck. But they can also be usually empathetic, intuitive, and compassionate, as if in that tangled brain circuitry there is a special capacity to see into people and situations. Yeah. Oh, copy? Okay, sorry. Connection is coming and going. Just seeing this. So, are we good now? How long ago was that, Rebecca? When I moved, I just moved the phone like an inch. I'll hang out for a second to see if it's still choppy. It shouldn't be choppy here, man. Dango. We'll just hang out for a minute. We'll turn it around and go for some doggo time. And then we're right at 30 minutes almost. How far? Because we've got, there's like these 3 little blocks at page 14. We can to there. And then we'll see if we can stop it there. Jim's story took us through many twists and turns. There was the time he had a job as a bus driver. One dreamy afternoon, doing his regular run, he made what he thought was his last loop and headed home for the bus yard, only to pull in the lot with a bus half full of confused and angry customers. He had forgotten to make the actual final stop on the line. "Where are we?" the passengers demanded. "Where have you taken us?" It was Jim's last ride for that bus company. Or there was the time in conversation with the female colleague when referred to his boss as a pinhead, only to realize, almost as he was saying it, that the female colleague was his boss's wife. "I don't do it on purpose," he said. "I just put my foot in my mouth. I don't think about who I'm talking to or where I am. Is it my unconscious wish to fail?" "It could be," I said. "That sort of thing has been known to happen. On the other hand, it could be something completely different." I began to tell Jim about ADD. "You see, it might be that you're not a screw or a loser at all, and that you do not have an unconscious wish to sabotage yourself. It might be, and it is beginning to sound to me as if this is very much the case, you have a neurological condition called attention deficit disorder. It's no more a thing to be ashamed of. Being nearsighted is. In fact, it's sort of like being nearsighted. You don't focus very well. You don't have to strain you have to strain to see clearly. People with ADD have trouble attending to one task at a time. You've probably heard of hyperactive children, and that's how this syndrome was originally described, hyperactivity in kids. We now know that the symptoms include more than just hyperactivity, and it affects adults as well as children. The hallmark symptoms of ADD are easy distractibility, impulsivity, and sometimes, but not always, hyperactivity or excess. These people are on the go, type A personalities, thrill seeker, energy, action-oriented, bottom line, gotta run type of people. They have lots of projects going on simultaneously. They're always scrambling. They procrastinate a lot, and they have trouble finishing things. Moods can be quite unstable, going from high to low in the bat of an eye for no apparent reason. Yeah, fire and ice was something that has been used as a description of me. They can be irritable, even rageful, especially when interrupted or making transitions. Their memories are porous. They daydream a lot. They love high stimulus situations. They love action and novelty. Just as this kind of problem can get in the way at work, it can also interfere with close relationships. Your girlfriend can get the wrong impression if you're constantly tuning out or going for fast action. As I explained to Jim what attention deficit disorder was, I watched him. He leaned forward in his chair, looked right at me. He began to nod his head at the mention of each new symptom. An excited look came over his face that had been so harried when we first met. When I was a kid, it was always Earth to Jim, or where's Jim, or Jim, why don't you just shape up? My parents and my teachers just thought I was lazy, so I would get punished or yelled at. For a while, I yelled back, but then I just sort of began to agree with them. I mean, what can you do? My dad had a way of smacking me across the side of my head if I talked back. It was kind of brutal, come to think of it, so I don't think of it much. I wonder, though, what kept me going? I mean, I never lost my spunk. I remember a teacher in the 6th grade made me copy pages out of a geography textbook because I had lost my homework. She said if I would admit I just hadn't done the homework instead of lying and saying I'd lost it, she wouldn't make me copy the pages. Well, I had done the homework, so I was not about to say I didn't. She got ticked off and really lost it. She got in this thing where she kept upping the ante, assuming I would back down. She kept adding on pages and pages for me to copy, and when she reached 100 pages, she stopped. I stayed up all night copying those pages, and I would have reached 100 pages if my mother hadn't found me in the middle of the night. She made me stop. Plus, she went into school the next day and raised a big stink. Old Miss Wilmot had to apologize to me. To me! It was the most satisfying moment of my entire educational career, bar none, and I'll always love my mother for it. But I wish they'd known then what you were telling me now, Jim went on. There were so many stories. My whole 9th grade year was like one long war with my parents. They got into the same thing Miss Wilmot did, always upping the ante. Their basic idea was that I wasn't trying hard enough, so they kept coming up with more and more punishments, none of which worked. It makes me kind of sick to think that I'm back on it. It makes me kind of sick to think back on it. It wasn't my parents' fault. They didn't know what was going on. Didn't anybody tell me about this before? Jim finally asked me in exasperation. People haven't really known much about it until very recently, I answered. Okay, there we go. Hopefully this, that's 1 through 14, chapter 1, page 1 through 14. That's all the time I have for today. I have to get back to daddyhood and schoolwork, so we'll pick up as soon as we can after that. Hopefully tomorrow. I tried to get up early to do this before the kids woke up, but my daughter woke up early and came into the bedroom to snuggle up with me. So then snuggled with her, thinking that if I got up, that she would then, stay awake at 6 in the morning. Which would maybe be okay, but either way, I wouldn't have been able to make the video. So I was like, let's just relax. So here we go. All right, we'll see you hopefully tomorrow.